A very warm welcome on day 2 of the Cartist Festival 2020. We would like to first introduce Mr. Ranojoy Mukerji, who is an automobilist, a prolific writer who writes for several newspapers and magazines from Financial Express, Hindu, New India Express, and many others. He has also initiated India's first radio show called Autograph, and he's closely working with Z Business and CNBC Awaz news channels. Ranojoy was formerly the managing editor of Auto India, India's largest circulating automobile magazine, and also had a short stint with SIAM looking after automobile projects. We are really happy to have him and join us for this session at the Cartist Festival. Welcome, Mr. Mukerji.
Thank you.
Second speaker for today's session is Mr. Anuj Guglani, founder and CEO of World Auto Forum, an engineering graduate from Nagpur University and MBA from IIT Delhi. He also has a LLB degree from Faculty of Law, University of Delhi, and he's the founder and CEO at World Auto Forum since 2019. He has been CEO of ACE at Work, a consulting firm for training strategy and SOPs for automakers and auto dealers across the world.
So we begin with the senior first.
Nothing like that. You see, when we talk about the EV scenario in India, what comes out at first is probably the acceptability of people. One of the biggest questions that I have been asked time and again is how accepting are people of the EV concept? And the biggest problem there is the range anxiety. And range anxiety is something that stands even today. I remember when we first, I was a young auto journalist in those days, first drove the Riva, which was not a Mahindra at that time. It was just coming out of Bangalore by Chetan Mani. The car looked very oddball. Nobody really liked the shape and they say it looked very funny. It had two doors and it had a very limited range. The range was 60, 65 kilometers that time, though the company claimed 80. Plus, you did not have air conditioning and a lot of other things which one seeks for in a car today. Of course, the Reva has since come a long way after being acquired by Mahindra. They did the E2O and a lot of other things, but problems persist. I mean, even today, I remember EESL, the Energy Efficient Services Limited Company of India. Now, that's a Government of India organization. They gave a bunch of cars to various ministries in the government, mostly Tata Ticor and Mahindra E-Veritos. But the problem still is that, the range of those cars is still 60, 65 kilometers, which is nothing. Today, if you want to commute from, say, Delhi to Jaipur, you're looking at 250 kilometers. So a 60, 65 kilometer is, I mean, you'll probably just go to Delhi and come back from Gurgaon. That is the kind of range that is there. The newer generation cars, of course, when you talk about cars like Hyundai Kona or you talk about MG ZS, they have done a lot better. You get a 300-kilometer range and all that is there. But the point at the end of the day is that those cars are very expensive and not really suited for the market. So where do we stand on EVs? Of course, the huge market served by two-wheelers, which is a very growing part of the segment. And companies like Hero and all have now committed to deliver for your deliveries by Pizza Hut, Domino's, and all these people. So okay, that is one segment. The commuter segment of bikes is another segment that is growing. India moves that way, but at least in the four-wheelers, there is no clear viable alternative. That is what I think. I would, of course, now ask Anuj to comment on this a little bit.
Well, I think these are very valid points by Mr. Ranojoy. I know that EV, of course, is a huge hype around it, but especially when it comes to four wheelers, there is not much choice. Even if you take the sales figures of the particular vehicles, they're hardly anything. They're minuscule. I will not even go to any other market for any comparison. And the other reason for that could also be that most of these vehicles, that you see, the cars, electric, apart from Reva, which was an exception, they are not really grounds up EV. We were talking this yesterday too. They are more retrofitted vehicles, like they have their IC engine and they've just taken out the IC engine, put the electric motor, charger, controller, everything, and it's electric vehicle. Electric vehicle has to be, grounds up EV design. It's like if you just take a horse carriage and you put, the way people would put an IC engine into it during the early years. That's what we are doing right now. But EV has to be designed grounds up, aerodynamics, range, everything, has to flow from the design. You just can't retrofit. That's just a short term, patchwork kind of a thing. And I think apart from that, there are many other issues. Like we are getting into BS6, we are getting into EV. We are saying that the topic of the discussion is way to a cleaner India through EV. So the other question which comes to our mind is how clean is the EV right now? EV is a global phenomenon. You go to you take example of Germany, California, UK, China. It's all growing. You have deadline of 2025, 2030. They are saying IC engine would be out, only EV. But if you see even globally, in the US, close to 45, 46% energy is from fossil fuel. In Germany, again, 45%. In India, it's around 65%. So what do I say? Here's my brand new EV powered by thermal. What do I say? So these are very important issues. But at the same time, one can also say that, hey, at least I am making the big cities clean. Sadly, India tops in air pollution. Top 12 most polluted cities are in India, and that's because of PM 2.5. There could be many reasons. There could be, those stubble burning and construction, and also automotive emissions. During lockdown, we had seen that the air was so clean. So people somewhere are emotionally getting attracted to an EV. And yes, if these government schemes and fame, and if we can extend the range anxiety, like Niti Aayog and DST are working on some fantastic schemes right now. They're working on Kirana charging. Just the way we used to have these STD booths at grocery stores, back in the 90s, where you make calls to your family or to your boyfriend or girlfriend, if you're studying away from home. So similarly, the government's going to have Kirana charging. In a Kirana store, you would have chargers for two-wheeler and three-wheeler, and there would be a smart meter which would be deployed by the discom, and you charge your vehicle. The app is there on the mobile. The printout comes out from the portable printer, and you pay for it. And you can pay through online through your wallet. It gets seamlessly deducted, or you can just pay cash. Similarly, next year we should also see the notification of the rules for pole charging. So why do you need a charging station per se? Though the government is working on more than 69K petrol pumps having electric chargers, but if every electric pole can have an integrated smart charger with a smart meter, a billing thing, you can charge from anywhere, any electric pole. You just have to ensure that it's deployed above the height of the trajectory of the street dog. Huh? So in India, there are many challenges. It can get flaked. Somebody can just take it off. Dog comes and sprays all over it. So challenges are there. But the good thing is, we are at the cusp of innovation and EV revolution, which I think today's policy makers will have a huge role to play in deciding the future action, future course of our industry. That's what I feel. Over to you, Ranojoy, sir.
Yeah, you are right. Most of the vehicles that you see in India are actually retrofitted. Uh, Except, of course, for the Hyundai Kona, which is a grounds up designed electric car. But you see, the problem is not only that. The problem, okay, you have talked about infrastructure, Kirana stores, this, that. Now, the battery technology that a lower cost EV uses is not lithium ion or, even a nickel metal hydrate. Some of these e-rickshaws and vehicles like that, they are using old lead acid batteries. So, number one, how safe is it to charge them that way? Second, the whole Indian concept of kata marna, yani ki bypassing the system and putting a wire directly into the supply, which makes sure that your home supply goes off, but some electricity charges someone's this thing. These challenges are of course there, and people are not used to paying, as you know, which they will eventually. I agree with you. There are a lot of challenges, and the government itself is saying, according to our Honorable Minister, Mr. Gadkari, the new Delhi Bombay Expressway will have a EV charging station every 20 kilometers or something. If you see the city of Delhi, in NDMC, they have put up close to 57 quick chargers for electric vehicles. I think these are all steps in a positive direction. But what remains to be seen is how reasonably priced the vehicles will be and how people will adapt to them. I completely buy your argument about fossil fuels. I totally agree that in a country which is predominantly thermal through coal, that's the biggest source of generation. What air cleanup are we talking about? But then let us also see the fact that to that coal burning emission thing, we are adding, say, electric, petrol and diesel cars, which again are adding at least say 2% or 3% of pollution. So even if we cut say 2 to 3% of pollution from each vehicle, I think even using a thermal charging station, it makes a lot of sense to go in for an electric vehicle, because electrics are clean. There is no doubt about it. And of course, when people realize that the service cost of an electric vehicle is far lesser than an internal combustion engine vehicle, that is where people will actually adopt. I don't think that people will really adopt thinking it's environment friendly or thinking they are doing good. They will adopt because sasta hai chalane mein, because it's going to cut down on the cost of running a vehicle. When you just need to charge. I used the MG EV for some time, and my charging for a night was working out to some 200, 250 rupees for a vehicle that gives you a range of 300 kilometers. For me, that's the cheapest I can, that's a two-wheeler cost basically of running a car. And of course, on two-wheelers, it would be much lesser. So I think that this whole concept will work. There are challenges, but I agree with you, Anuj, that I think the Kirana store concept, the electricity pole concept, uh, these should work. Of course, initially there will be problems. People will steal electricity. People will do all sorts of things. But then the other thing that concerns me here also is that there is no shortage of electricity in our country. We all know that there's enough electricity generated. The problem is the transmission of that electricity. Uh, so I fear that when, say, if in a city like Jaipur, for example, if 10,000 vehicles plug into a grid, will the grid collapse? Now that will be one of the biggest things, because you're not, equipped to deal with that kind of a situation or a scenario. So these challenges will always remain. I agree with you that fossil fuels will be a problem, but then we have to live with what we live. And I think as we go on, maybe the electric poles can have some sort of solar charging on them, some sort of new forms of energy, which will make sure that electric vehicles get their due.
True,
Anuj?
that's a very valid point, Mr. Ranojoy. In fact, this reminds me of the vice chairman's announcement in 2018 during the Niti Ayog summit, MOVE summit. He had announced that they have done their homework, and they believe that by 2047 is the year when India's EVs should be 100% powered by greens, by renewables. So whether it is biogas, bio CNG, or it is solar, or it is wind. Solar, we are doing a fantastic job as it is, in the country. Uh, what really leaves a lot to be done is biogas. In fact, if we can harness biogas, bio CNG, we kill not just two birds with multiple birds with just one stone. We have this huge problem of these landfills. We have a huge problem of these huge, garbage dumps. Methane gas, escaping from there, which is a greenhouse gas, which causes excessive pollution. Then it causes leaching. Water, it pollutes the water bodies. So, if every colony in every urban city in the country can be made a zero waste colony, if we really enforce segregation of waste, we started segregation of waste, but it's unless the government supports and enforces it, it doesn't really happen. So when the waste gets segregated, the organic waste gets composted and biogas is produced. Non-organic, it gets recycled. There are a lot of NGOs working in that, like Chintan. So nothing goes to the landfill. So when you're producing this biogas, bio CNG, by purified, you produce electricity from that, and that's you're producing electricity from your waste. Just imagine, it's so powerful. So that, along with energy from solar, from wind, easily we can do it. And more population can actually be an advantage, an opportunity. More population, more waste, more electricity, that to green. And you also stop and inject the methane which is escaping, which is increasing the pollution. Then yes, I totally agree with you on this principle that yes, if we have electric, even if to begin with it's powered by thermal, at least we don't have these 10 million or 50 million tailpipes polluting the cities. At least those tailpipes go off. Even if they get shifted to chimneys, somewhere that can still be managed interim. But that's a huge advantage if those tailpipes go off. It's a huge, huge load on the air. And clean air, like in fact, Mr. Saraswat, who is the member of Niti Ayog, I think he mentioned at one of the FICCI programs yesterday, that Niti Aayog is also working on the roadmap for hydrogen vehicles. That's fantastic, because probably we could just, cross and skip and jump to hydrogen. In China, they're looking at testing 500,000 FCEVs on roads, on public roads next year by 2021. So if we can build a FCEV, network infra, if we can really have a hydrogen network, a hydrogen ecosystem, then we don't really need to worry about the source of electricity also. So a lot can be done, and I think we should work on EV and FCEV parallelly. It could just be that EV turns out to be the landline, and FCEV turns out to be, the mobile technology. The other thing, when I mentioned landfill, what really concerns me is the battery recycling. Like lead acid is the poster boy of the country. So in fact, I was talking to one of these battery manufacturers. They said that up to 90% of lead acid batteries get recycled. Because if you also even look in your vehicle, when you change your car's battery, you always give it in replacement, and you get some good some decent discount also. So lead acid is a poster boy, up to 90% recycled. But what about lithium ion? Our phones have lithium ion, and these batteries have been going to the landfill. We don't even know. But just imagine if if the lithium ion battery of the electric vehicles start going there, or people start dumping the old ones. They might reuse, like lithium ion in an electric vehicle might come for some recharging purpose later, when it's not good enough for electric vehicle. But eventually it will be discarded one day when it really gets unusable. Where does it go? It go to a landfill. That will cause excessive leaching, excessive water table pollution. So what is the plan? I'm here to see a plan on battery recycling. We have FAME 1, we have FAME 2, we have EV plan, we have this, we have that. Where is a battery recycling story or the piece in it? That needs huge enforcement, because otherwise, it'll do more harm than good. Yes, sir.
Well, it's very interesting that you talked about recycling. This is a point which I also wanted to bring out. I once somebody asked me that, do you do any recycling in India? I said, yes, you can go to any dhaba. They use the same tea leaves to make tea 25 times. That is for me the biggest example of recycling. But coming to what you are saying, I think it is very important. Let's take hydrogen. Hydrogen is a very good thing. But Anuj, what has happened interestingly, even in China, I did a lot of study on this. Hydrogen is not working out very viably. In the sense, it is expensive to produce hydrogen. I agree, you can make it from landmass and things like that. But it is second is the safety factor. Now, India being very bureaucratic, what is very interesting is that to run hydrogen as a fuel, because Tata Motors and Ashok Leyland have been trying it on their buses, you need also a permission from the director of explosives, because it is treated as an explosive. And so you need that it will not ignite. There's such a lot of challenges are coming there. Honda, for example, the company that you worked for, they tried for long, as you know, with a vehicle called the FCV, which is a hydrogen vehicle they were running in California. And 2 years back, they started giving it out on lease also, but that program has also not worked. They have had to withdraw it. So I think that in terms of at least when you talk about electric mobility, conventional electricity charged vehicles perhaps are the way more to go. Hydrogen is good, very good, but we don't know how much we'll be able to develop it. China also is now gradually shifting, especially for smaller vehicles. They're shifting to only the buses, etc. They're trying to run on hydrogen. The next biggest thing that you rightly mentioned was recycling. Lead acid, yes, is recycled. Lithium ion, no. I have actually been near the premises of a certain phone manufacturer, and I should not name them. They are based in Noida. So I've actually seen batteries being dumped by tons into a land. I have seen it. I mean, it's not somebody else telling me. So there is a huge thing, and that is just for a cell phone. I mean, just imagine what happens when you put it into a vehicle. Today,
Absolutely.
a lot of these two-wheelers like Ather MG in Bangalore and all, having these wow two-wheelers with lithium-ion batteries, or even Bajaj, which is Chetak for that matter, and other well-known manufacturers. What will happen when all that battery has to be recycled? We don't have a recycling law. We are talking about scrappage of old vehicles. Perfect. That's a very good thing. But at the same time, I think we need to talk about how to recycle automotive grade batteries or any other batteries which have high discharge this thing, because they are an environmental concern, you know. And it's just that it'll be just like saying that, oh, you know, we moved to CNG because it's a cleaner fuel, but we forgot about everything else. So we do need a battery recycling policy. We do, along with the vehicle scrappage policy, we also need to have a tremendous focus on infrastructure till infrastructure comes up properly. And okay, Niti Aayog has been saying that, oh, you know, by 2030 we shall be moving totally towards electric vehicles. That will not happen, as you yourself know. You spoke about how 2047 is supposed to be when we make this transition to almost 100% electric. By then, there will, of course, be a lot more alternatives also. There'll be alternatives in cars, there'll be alternatives in two wheelers, there'll be alternative in load carrier vehicles. And, you know, public transportation has to be the focus, because unless public transportation majorly moves to electric, we are going to have a problem. I have seen those Tata hydrogen buses being run in Delhi. They seem to work very well. I've seen the Tata electric buses being run in Delhi. They seem to work well. Ashok Leland is also doing pilot projects. But till we push public infrastructure, it will not happen. And manufacturers also have to take it up. I was speaking to somebody in the Delhi government, and they told me that they want to place an order for electric buses, but it's not there. Their manufacturers are saying that they can only supply 200 to 50 buses over a period of 1 year. I think this needs to change. I think you know, all state transport corporations have huge land at their disposal. They can easily put up very good fast charging infrastructure, and this is where I think the mentality needs to change, and we need to push public transport as such when it comes to electric vehicles. Over to you, Anuj.
Surely, I agree on that part. On that, part of the electric vehicle thrust should be on public transport, and even the policymakers are working towards the same. In fact, as you rightly mentioned about the electric buses, in fact, India as a whole, not just the tier one towns or not just the metros, India as a whole needs more buses. And the best part is that in electric buses, because the buses are point to point, and there is a resting time after every route is completed. So battery swapping actually can be made workable in buses. If we just need to apply some innovation and some scheduling the right way, battery swapping in buses is possible, though it's going to be heavy. You need to automate it, you will need people, you have safety concerns. But then you can have smaller batteries, if you're doing battery swapping in buses. That saves a lot of cost. It's point to point, it's doable, you can plan it. And it is in the hands of the government, or it is much easier to regulate and get it done at the ground level, because you're not leaving it to the consumer whether he or she goes for it or not. Give a deadline, there is a huge backlash. But in public transport, in buses, we can easily do it, and it's workable. And as Mr. Ranojoy mentioned, we need the supply and good options in electric buses. And I'm sure Ashok Leland, Tata Motors, JBM, Volvo Eicher, they are all working towards it. And in the next 3 to 4 years, I think we should have some great options in that. And that coupled with battery swapping for buses, for the city buses, I think that can be a good tipping point for electric mobility. Also, coming to the battery technology, we've all seen how cobalt and nickel play a huge role in the battery chemistry, and how cobalt mining is so unfriendly. There's so much of child abuse, and it produces so many greenhouse gases when it's done, the mining. Then it's carcinogenic for the people, for the workers who are working in those mines. So there is already happening a shift. A lot of civil rights and social groups are protesting cobalt. And of course, we know that countries like China have a lion's share in owning cobalt mines. So this shift has already started from cobalt. So cobalt-free batteries, or lithium iron phosphate, or removing nickel. In fact, CATL, which is one of the biggest vendors to Tesla for batteries, they are going gung-ho on LFP. And I think the good news is, the way Indian researchers and scientists are working on the solid state batteries, So solid state batteries, as what it promises right now, if the promise is delivered, they're saying 500 miles, of range. Currently, even the Model S Tesla has around 406 miles of range. So if we can get a 500-mile range on a battery, I think it's going to be phenomenal. It's going to be flying. opening, and I'm sure if it happens in India, we will surely take care of the cost of acquisition. It's not going to be through the roof, because we at India are really great at what we call frugal innovation, jugaad, when we can send, when we can send a space mission to moon at a cost less than IPL budget, then I'm sure, we can be really frugal, and we can be really innovative. So I'm really very positive, on the India EV story, which can be a great example for the world, I feel. Yeah, Ranojoy sir.
Yeah, you are right about frugal engineering and all these things that are happening. My biggest concern, and battery swapping is a very, very good thing that you spoke about. But over here, I have an issue. My feel is that manufacturers need to communicate and work together on this. Today, every auto manufacturer has a different battery. The size is different, the shape is different, the charging cycles are different, the discharge is different. So it is important that all the companies, whether it is Ashok Leyland, Tata, Volvo, Eicher, JBM, all these guys, they need to come together and work on one standard design for the battery. Otherwise, it will not work. Otherwise, it will still be the Boeing and the Airbus story, because you stick to one type. You can't interchange between the other because parts don't change. So you will have to have an infrastructure where the batteries are standardized. Maybe the government can work on this and say, listen, this should be the dimension of your battery. This should be its charge and discharge cycles. This should be how it works. Only then will this whole concept of swapping batteries will work. Currently, all these e-rickshaws also that run, some of them use a similar battery, but most of them use different batteries. So over here also, unless there is a system wherein most batteries are standard and they can be swapped at a certain point for a certain distinct, these things will need to be taken care of. And again, this is where legislation will drive it, because no manufacturer will willingly work with another manufacturer. They will all say that our system is superior and we need to do what we need to do. Solid state batteries is good. They're also working on capacitor based batteries and things like that. The thing is energy density and energy storage. So that is what, from what I have heard, is still some way off. Till that happens, we need to figure out a way how we can standardize these batteries and make swappable easy system. I think the same should be applicable for vehicles which run on fleets. For example, all your Olas and Ubers and taxi segments. In that also, the government maybe should come out with a standard battery, so which is that okay, you can swap the battery between car to car as long as it is of a certain dimension. Then these guys will not have a range anxiety that they'll have to charge 8 hours after a run of say 100 kilometers or 150 kilometers. They can simply swap the battery at a kirana shop or a petrol pump maybe and carry on. So these are things that definitely need to be worked out, and I think Niti Aayog in this is of course playing a huge role. This is a legislation they need to work on, because other than this, the system will not be very successful. Anuj?
True. I totally agree with you on this point, Anuj sir. In fact, especially, when the government is allowing selling of electric vehicles without battery, and and as you rightly mentioned, the fleet, when you are selling an EV in fleet, it's not an emotional purchase. It's a purely business driven purchase.
Yeah.
So, and if I leave the choice of battery to the user, consumer, or owner, then I would put the cheapest battery, or also probably the most ghatia battery. That will ruin the range, that will ruin the product delivery performance. And then what will I blame? I'll say this EV is useless. That's what I'll say this EV is useless. This is useless technology. My diesel, petrol, CNG was much better. At least it is reliable. I was not stuck with my shipment or consignment in the middle of nowhere. Just imagine somebody is carrying perishable stuff, and the vehicle gets stuck, in a hot sun on the highway, and the help is a couple of hours away. His shipment is ruined. When after sales, when the RSA guy will reach that vehicle, he's giving blows to that guy. You've lost money for me. I've lost money just because of you. So that's a very valid point. We need to have regulation, legislature, putting their foot down on the battery, classification. And we have to have battery standards. So you can't use any battery lower than this standard. You have to have these batteries. Say for fleet, it's this. For various different type of vehicles, it is this battery. The other thing which I feel when we talk about fleet, that this first mile mid mile or last mile. In fact, this project is very close to my heart. I feel this electric cargo auto is gonna, this auto which has been there for last 50, 60 years. And if you see the old golden movies of Devan and Saab also, you'll see that he came in an auto, to Nutan ji's house in one of the movies, Tere Ghar Ke Samne. So that auto goes back to 50, 60 years. Even in fact, very little has changed after that. But this auto, electric cargo auto, I feel, this loaders, they're gonna be there, and they can be the panacea, of first mile, mid mile, last mile. Because see, majority of the businesses in India are MSME. You know, majority of the shipments are under 1 ton. So it really fits. Most of the places, industrial areas, very tight spaces, very thin alleys. You have to enter, you have to maneuver. So this creature, you can just take anywhere, any back alley, industrial area, upper cupboard. So if you add a nice battery swapping, which can give you a range, and yes, with some safety, aspects. Currently, the loaders and the electric autos which are coming, they topple at the drop of a hat. Their bodies are not that safe, whether they're coming, the box is coming from China or wherever. We need to work on some safety standards, for this. Probably people are not that concerned because they're not carrying any passengers. So theek hai, gir bhi gaya to chalega, saman gira, but at least there's a driver. He's a human being. So we have to focus on the safety of these loaders. But this can really drive the EV revolution, I feel. And Flipkart has already come out. They say that by 2030, 100% of their shipment would be on electric. Amazon has made similar statement. Jeff Bezos came on the electric auto when he came to India. Reliance, Amazon, Flipkart, they've all made their announcements and also started taking fleets. So if the government can do something around this electric cargo auto and electrify the first, mid, and last mile, delivery, it's going to be a big step. That should be given good priority beyond just incentive on the motor.
I agree. You see, the thing here is that you know what they call these small vehicles? They call them chota hati because that's what they carry. And you're so right. And I think manufacturers also have a huge role to play. Whether it's Piaggio with its Ape range or Bajaj and all these people, the load carrying three wheeler needs to primarily go electric, three wheeler or even four wheeler for that matter. The Ace truck
Yes,
and
yes.
these things. And this is where again battery swapping will work. Instead of where that fuel tank is located, if you make a compartment where you can just put in a battery or take out a battery, this is what it works. And yes, you can have, as you rightly pointed out, you can have a BIS or an ISI marked certification for a certain battery that, okay, this is the minimum standard. You won't go below this. If you do, then it will not be accepted as a public decision. Like today in CNG, you have that, okay, if you don't have a CNG endorsement on your RC, then you cannot get gas filled, right? Similarly, if you must say that, okay, every time the battery is swapped, then there should be, today it's not very difficult to put in a chip or something which identifies it as a correct battery. I mean, even printer cartridges have that. So what is the problem of putting it inside a, but it's a very low cost RFID technology. And I think this is something that we need to work on. Small batteries for smaller load bearing vehicles, larger ones for larger vehicles, and of course big ones for buses and trucks which need to go on to that. Because you see, India is not ready for a Tesla super truck yet. That kind of cost is not okay for us. But what we can do is, like you mentioned, the smaller autos, the this thing, then the Tere Ghar Ke Samne Kani has to continue for at least 100 years more. No? You cannot just shut it off at one point and say, ki, okay, अब मैं
Good one.
तुम्हारे सामने नहीं आऊंगा. So that does not work. So today you need to do that. And I think, the implementation of this has to also be in smaller towns and cities. B towns, B cities. I mean, my mother came from Dehradun and I've been to Dehradun a lot. You cannot go there because of those three-wheeler tempos there, as they call them. The pollution is so huge, it makes your eyes water when you walk down the road. Cities, small cities, that is where the revolution has to come from. The Allahabads, the Kanpur, the Chota Coimbatores, around the country, the revolution has to be driven from the small cities, which have a lot of industry, which have a lot of labor intensive work. This is where these electric goods vehicles actually need to make their mark. Even if you go to smaller industrial areas in Delhi or Bombay or all these places, as you rightly said, the alleyways are very small. Maneuvering is difficult. This is where small vehicles come in use, and unless these vehicles per se en masse move to electric, till then you cannot talk about a cleaner road or a cleaner environment.
Absolutely, I totally agree. So, in fact, if we see, we are looking at electrifying the buses because they are mass movers and they move point to point, and battery swapping can be made practical. In fact, Mr. Manny is very gung ho on that when I last spoke with him. Then we're looking at the two wheelers because we have to understand that. In fact, this reminds me of what Bhargav Saab had mentioned. During one of the interaction that India as a country India is one of those very few countries where people travel more than 50 kilometers for work on a two wheeler. And two-thirds of gasoline consumption in our country is by a two wheeler. So actually, if you see the huge import bill of petroleum is because of the two wheeler. So these are very low hanging fruits if you want to electrify. Then you come to three wheeler. You can really make it a mass movement. As Ranojoy sir mentioned, tier one, tier two, tier N towns where the spaces are tight. You can have the passenger electric, and of course e-rickshaw. It has been a revolution on its own. People say that it revolutionized because the government didn't interfere much initially. So there was this cost of the cost of acquisition, the cheap Chinese imports, the cost of running, then tanka, stealing electricity, then changing the motor and putting a heavy motor to get speed and to get a higher load carrying capacity. Then you have great companies, battery swapping companies like Green Fuel, who are doing fantastic job in battery swapping. They observe that these e-rickshaws, their lead acid batteries were not lasting more than a couple of months because of excessive usage and deep discharge or excessive charging. So they said, hey, I have this lithium-ion battery. You come to me, you take it from me early in the morning. I'll give you a nice, fully charged lithium-ion battery. You just give me the deposit money, what you pay for lead acid to buy a lead acid battery. You pay X amount, you give it to me as security deposit. Every morning, come to me, take a fully charged lithium-ion, only for 200 or 250 rupees, depending on the location. You run it, you get that extra range, you get that zip on the flyover, you get that reliability, and you earn more money. And the e-rickshaw guys are finding value in it. For the last 3 years, they were doing good business in battery swapping with e-rickshaw drivers who will be very particular where they're spending the money. So if anything makes value, if it makes economic sense, if I have a benefit cost to benefit ratio favorable, I will spend money. If they can take out money from the pocket of an e-rickshaw driver, anything is possible. So we cannot say that EV revolution needs to run only on the wheels of subsidy. It needs to run on the wheels of value. The people should see value at the end of the day. It will surely run, it will fly.
Yeah, value for money. I think India, what people misread about the Indian value system is they think that India wants everything cheap. No, we don't want everything cheap. We want everything to be value for money. VFM is the main concept here. Otherwise, even when you see conventional sales of automobiles, or you'll always see that the higher models which have more value, they sell better than the basic tier of models, because people see a certain value of paying for certain goods and services. That has to happen. The biggest thing, Anuj, I also feel is that battery manufacturing has to come of age. Currently in India, we are not doing battery manufacturing for any kind of an EV. And unless you have that kind of a thing happening, the cost will remain very high. Till we learn to indigenize, till we do that make in India share for batteries, it will not work. And yes, there is a problem that China is sitting on most of the world's lithium ion reserves, and that's a problem. But I think we should explore manufacturing batteries, even if it means that you set up a joint venture at first, you set up certain industries. There's no harm in taking technology from people who are already into this and people who know more about us. There's no harm in learning from others. So one should get into this, because unless you get into battery manufacturing and, as you said, getting into that model of hiring out lithium ion batteries for battery swap and all, that can only happen when a certain price limit has been breached. That can only happen when production happens here. That can only happen when failures of a battery can be compensated very quickly by getting another battery, and that too at a cost. So I feel that battery manufacturing in India, and when battery manufacturing comes, recycling will also happen. Recycling happens currently even in automotive batteries because, like you also said, that the batteries are exchanged for a certain sum of money. It goes back, it serves life in some other prospects. But I think that when battery manufacturing starts in mass scale in India, that is when a real revolution will happen.
And in fact, Ranojoy sir, to that, if we can add, that any company which is setting up a shop for battery manufacturing, of course, going to be profitable. You can export all over the world. You have to have some standards for battery recycling too. So if you are having dealers all across the country, you have to incentivize. There has to be some carrot and stick story. Basically, there has to be some incentive. There has to be some penalty. If you are not recycling the battery. The other thing is, as you had mentioned about standardizing the batteries, we also need to learn from the West. And in fact, DST is already working on it. They have a very serious working group along with the industry of standardizing the charging plug. You know, just like we've had USB sockets, in our devices. It makes life so easy. Whether it's a lamp or a phone, or a music player, anything. USB, array, it's a USB. Okay, I can charge it, or I can retrieve data, either ways. So the electric vehicle charging plug, that needs to be standardized. It should not be what Google has to do. If you search for charging stations, Google also shows the kind of plug which is available at those charging stations. So if there's a charging station nearest to you and you can only barely reach there, but it doesn't have your plug, you are again stuck. What do you do? Where you go? Then you will again curse, what is this EV? My IC was much better. So the charging plug standardization is a very important job, and it's not going to be easy. Trust me, because as you rightly mentioned, every OEM or every company will push their technology, will push their plug because it's easy for them. You know. So how we, and of course, it's also the OEMs can't change the plug socket at the drop of a hat. They've already invested so much of R&D. They have put in so much of resources, time, money, everything. So if there can be some converter kind of a thing, mid level, like you travel to the west, you have converters to run your power appliances. So we need that standardization. Either it should be a mid layer or it can be the endpoint, but there needs to be a standardization so that there can be seamless transfer of power, and you don't have to really apply your mind. Like, for example, if you see a gas station, if I'm running out of fuel in my current vehicle, I see a gas station, I just drive. I don't think that whether this gas station gives petrol of my car's classification or not. You don't think, you just drive in. That similarly, if I see a charging station, I should just drive in. I should not think whether this has my charging plug or not. This is a very important point. And as I mentioned, we are sitting on that cusp. So we are at that stage where we are going from horse carriage to motor vehicle. So from IC engine to EV. So the teething issues, these transition problems and pains we need to minimize for a seamless transition.
Anuj, in India, when you say gas station, could refer to a CNG station also. So, what you say.
Petrol
But
pump, petrol pump.
But I'm getting what you're saying. But there's something very interesting that I found out, and you can do it too. Is charging, like you rightly said, charging plugs are of different types for different manufacturers. Indian manufacturers use a different type. Foreign manufacturers use that CCS4 standard or whatever they all use. So I came across something, the Indian mind, as you know, the Jugaad mindset and the frugal engineering mindset, in better words, is so good that today on Amazon they're actually selling adapters for this,
Wow.
which work vice versa. You can charge any type of vehicle at any type of thing, and at what price? 500 rupees, 600 rupees. So yes, the Indian Jugaad is working overtime on this, and I think you're very right. We need to also standardize the kind of chargers. The unfortunate problem is the mobile phone industry has not been able to do it yet. Apple uses Lightning. Some manufacturers use USB-C. Some use normal USB-B. So, there is still a certain standard problem there. And I see that problem being retained for foreign manufacturers versus Indian manufacturers. I mean, all the foreign manufacturers use the CCS4 standard, which is there right from the Mercedes EQC to the current MGs and Konas, whereas the Indian ones, the Tigors and the Mahindra E-Veritos, use a different type of a plug. So somewhere we need to standardize this, and all we need to tell vehicle manufacturers that you need to supply an adapting cable, an adapting plug, like you have a multi-socket that can go into your electricity point, and you can put a flat pin or you can put in any kind of an adapter.
Absolutely.
That is existing on Amazon and that can be supplied. That is one. Number two, when battery manufacturing is concerned, I think you should take a leaf out of the hotel and the restaurant industry, where they say that okay, if you set up a certain hotel or a certain restaurant, you need to have an ETP plant for recycling your waste. So you know it has to meet a certain standard, and only then you'll get certified. So I think if you do something similar for a battery manufacturing facility, that you tell them, okay, listen, you can manufacture batteries or whatever type you want, but you need to have this recycling plant, which should be part of your premises and which should be able to thoroughly recycle. Now, when you go abroad and buy anything in the West, whether it's even a can of Coke for that matter, it says that please recycle. If you return it to the to a certain this thing center, you get 5 cents a can or whatever.
True, true.
Point is that kind of an incentive has to be built in, that okay, when you know that your battery has reached a certain this thing, instead of calling the kawadiwala and telling him to take it away for whatever it is worth in weight, maybe you can call the same battery guys and say, listen, I have to change my battery, I want a new battery, can you supply me with a this thing? And I think there will be you can exchange that battery, but I think there'll be also a huge market for refurbished batteries. Just like there's a refurbished market for everything today, right? From cars, mobiles to any electric gadget you can think of, any electronic you can think of. There's a huge refurbished market, and both Flipkart, Amazon, and all these companies, they sell you actually refurbished this thing under a certain, which has a certain guarantee on it. Today, when you go and buy a used car, for example, from any of the manufacturers, OEMs, this thing they tell you, okay, you can get a let's say a 2-year warranty on the drivetrain or something like that. I think it's something like that if you start with the batteries. So let us say if a certain battery is priced at 5,000 rupees and you have a refurbished version starting at 3,000 or 2,500 as an option, they will, which is manufacturer certified and will give you a certain listing. I think that would be an interesting way to go. And you make sure that the manufacturer of the battery puts up a recycling unit. You tell him that you won't get certification till you do that, and that would be possibly the way to make people going for recycling.
True. And also, I'm sure that manufacturer would make good money on recycling because anything which is refurbished, whether it's a used car or any used appliance, because there is no fixed price, there is nobody knows the price at which you acquired it from the first owner or the earlier owner. So, in all likelihood, the profit margin is much higher when it's
Yeah,
refurbished. So, that can pay for the cost for the capex that goes in this recycling unit for sure. Absolutely.
true. And if you see scrapping centers for cars around the world, they make a lot of money because they recycle everything, whether it's the glass, whether it's the lights, whether it is the seats. In fact, companies like Mercedes and all claim that 90% of the S class is recyclable. So the point is there is money in this, as you pointed out. There is money in doing all these activities along with new batteries. Your refurbished or recycled batteries will also have a huge this thing, and will have a lesser environmental impact instead of just trying to maybe burn it or shove it into the land or throw it into the river, which is very bad and which unfortunately is something we have been doing since time immemorial. And that's the reason why our lands and our rivers are so polluted. So a proper way to dispose of these things is very necessary. Otherwise, you will still come to the same problems. Even with changing to 100% electric, you won't see any environmental benefits. It will all go down the drain. And
Literally.
clean energy and all these things will not happen unless you do that.
Yes. And we just need to tell the entrepreneurs that, hey, if it is going down the drain, then actually it's your profit which is going down the drain. You're losing money because all that which just went down the river or just gone in smoke in the air, that could have been profit for you. You've just lost that
Absolutely.
profit. and the government has lost tax earning on that. So might as well recycle it. Might as well, you can actually make gold out of it. Same reason why, I keep telling the government also, why are we not taking this age old, a century old, such a rudimentary technology of biogas and bio CNG and actually going nationwide with it? What stops us? It just can be the new electricity grid. Just like we have the solar grid, we can have the bio CNG. We can have, farmers are protesting right now. They say that their earnings are going down. Their earnings are cyclical. Every farmer has cattle, at their house. They have cow dung. So even if we can just tell them, and we also we have some experts, at World Order Forum. We had a small body called Jan Urja, which we were, really promoting, far and wide, but we didn't get much response to it. One of the scientists who was working with us, his design of a 2 meter cube biogas plant, it was deployed in Gujarat. So every farmer, if they can have a 2 meter cube biogas plant right at their home, so they produce enough biogas from the cow dung that is, with them, gets used for their cooking purpose. Then it produces biomanure. So you don't have to waste money on expensive fertilizers or pesticides. You can use that, then whatever excess cow dung you have or excess gas you have, you can sell that to the gobar bank or the biogas bank. It can be on the lines of Amul Cooperative, Operation Flood. Just the way, before Operation Flood, what had happened, Dr. Kurian, Dr. Vergas Kurian had mentioned that he had said that at that time India was the largest, had the largest population of cattle. India had the largest population of cattle, but we were nowhere in the dairy production. After Operation Flood, we became the second largest milk producer of the world, just because we harnessed a resource that we have. Similarly, we have the second highest population in the country. So why can't we harness this, this asset? And in fact, sorry for using this word, but actually the human excreta, actually is most efficient, has the highest calorific value for bio CNG. So if we can connect all the toilets to a bio CNG plant, it can solve our power crisis overnight. It can, resolve our dependence on fossil fuels overnight. Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, we have spent, 9K CR or 10K CR on toilets. Every toilet can be a profit center. Just imagine. It can sell that energy to the grid. They can be bio CNG grid, or they can be an electricity or a green grid powered by bio CNG. And it's rudimentary technology. Even a farmer in the hinterlands can operate it. It's so simple. So these are, opportunities we are sitting on. And it happens very rarely that you have things like these which can power the farmer, solve his or her problems, and also solve the landfill issues of the big cities. Otherwise, there's such a huge divide. The very reason why farmers are protesting and marching all the way to Delhi, they are dissatisfied. Somewhere something is not right. You can't have, there's a reason why 500 unions of farmers are protesting. So here is an opportunity where we can have the EV, we can have the cleanliness, we can solve the air pollution from the landfills, we can do away with landfills, everything in one shot. It can really be possible.
And this revolution can be driven from our villages,
Precisely.
because with the kind with toilets and all those things being built, if you put all of that into a 2 meter square plant, as you said, that will power a new India. That will give electricity on a different level. That will let that will make people realize that their actual waste, whether it is from humans or animals, can be used as an alternative means of power. And that is where people will benefit from it. Today, if you're rewarded by putting your electricity back into the grid, as some places are doing, then you start realizing that value. And this can, as you said, this can be implemented across smaller cities, across villages. So when you run your EVs, and I'm looking at a future where eventually, because of the high torque nature of electric motors and EVs, I'm looking at a future where tractors will be powered by EVs. And
Absolutely.
if you have a tractor which will be powered by fuel from your own home,
Absolutely.
you are becoming self-sufficient.
True.
Then you're not paying anybody. In fact, you might get paid for putting electricity back into the grid. So this is a revolution that has to happen. It has to happen from villages. It has to happen from small towns. And in the bigger cities, we need to look at this problem differently. There cannot be one holistic solution. It has to act from one. It has to be driven by legislation to a point. It has, but then people also have to have that responsibility to do it on their own. Unless people drive the revolution will not happen.
True. So the farmer having an electric tractor powered by waste from or biogas from his own backyard would be the real Atmanirbharta, I feel. What
Absolutely,
the vision
I
of our honorable Prime Minister.
I agree on that. And the tractor is also a vehicle, no? At the end of the day,
Absolutely.
it's an EV. And when you go around on Indian highways and you see those jugards running all over with a simple diesel engine, which can be a water pump, which can drive a passenger vehicle, a cargo vehicle, or do X number of things. Now, just imagine a scenario where an electric motor replaces that, and it will still do the functions, but it will not pollute, and there'll be no emissions. So you can still have a water pump running. You can still carry vehicles. You can carry cattle. You can carry passengers. You can do what you want with it. But the best part is it is all powered by yourself. You are
Absolutely.
going to power it from your own this thing. So that is Atmanirbharta.
True. I
So
totally
all
agree.
this will happen.
Great. So I think the clock has struck 12. So Himanshu, you're there.
So this was a wonderful insight thought how Indian EV has to move ahead and for a better India. A
I the
wonderful
discussion.
session. And thank you so very much, Raya sir and Anu sir, for coming and sharing your views with Cartist Festival 2020. Look forward to other session next year. Thank you, sir.
And all the very best for Cartist. It's a great thing that you're doing, Himanshu. Keep it up. Keep it up. It's fantastic. It's
Thank
unique
you, sir. Thank you.
and it's super cool. Thank you.